I've been thinking a lot about what makes a man or a woman a disciple of Christ. There's no doubt that being a Christian requires action. Lots and lots of people sitting in churches want to call themselves Christians, but they don't ever want to do anything. They want to wear the name, but they don't want to get in the game. So yeah, you can't just label yourself and think that you really are. When I was a little boy, like a lot of kids in the 1960s, I wore a coonskin cap. Genuine. That's not me. That's not me. Luckily, no pictures of me in a coonskin cap exist. I carried a Daniel Boone lunchbox with me to school every day, but that didn't make me a pioneer. Some of my little 92-pound friends never went anywhere without their Rams jersey, but that didn't make them one of the fearsome foursome. I know some rabid NASCAR fans whose entire home is decorated in early Joey Logano, Kurt Busch, or Dale Earnhardt, but that doesn't mean they've been up in the wall or got a push from a teammate. If you're a disciple, that suggests that you're not just sitting in the stands and watching the action. You're in the game. And being a disciple also requires the disciplines of a Christian life. So maybe that's what makes somebody a Christian, a disciple. They go to church most Sundays. They read the Bible sometimes. They pray every day. The men do what they're supposed to do, and the ladies do what they're supposed to do. A second grade teacher told her class that the next day they were going to have a special kind of show and tell, and everybody should bring something to show the class that might be found in their particular church, which represents what their religion is. This was obviously many years ago when you could do something like that. The next day in second grade, little Levi stood up in front of the class and said, "My name is Levi, we're Jewish, and this is a Star of David." Then a little girl stood up and said, "My name is Mary Elizabeth. We're Catholic, and this is a crucifix." A third child stood up and said, "My name is Clarence. We're Baptists, and this is a chicken casserole." Is it doing the things expected of you that makes you a disciple? Now, there's probably some truth in all those things, but there's something else that can identify you as a real disciple of Christ. And this one gets overlooked because it's far less obvious. It's sometimes hidden so others can't really see it. It's less tangible. But here's the thing. This thing drives all the other things that we've mentioned. This thing exists only at your most foundational gut level. This thing will determine what kind of disciple you are, if you are one at all. And I'm talking about attitude. But first, welcome to Rappahannock Church of Christ. Those of you here in the flesh and those of you who are here virtually. It'll always be our goal, and I was so happy to hear Jennifer kind of mention the same thing. It will always be our goal that when you walk out of here in about a half an hour, you'll be able to say, "That was a good use of my Sunday morning. I'm glad I came." In other words, you're a little closer than when you walked in. And just a word to those of you online. We see you when you leave the broadcast, and we know who you are, and we're keeping a list. I'm just saying. So my premise, my thesis, my hypothesis is that your attitude drives most everything else about you. Yeah, we can tell a lot about your spirituality by your actions, of course. But your attitude is what drives your actions. And yes, we can tell a lot about the level of commitment to Christ that you have by your spiritual disciplines. But your attitude drives how seriously you take the teachings of Jesus. And that shouldn't surprise any of us. I mean, a whole lot of us encourage our children to play sports. But that child's attitude, which may take some years to develop, that child's attitude will determine what kind of athlete they'll be. You can't give them that. You can give them the latest catcher's equipment and buy them the hottest baseball bat, but you can't give them the right attitude. I'm going to ask you to indulge me. I'm going to tell a personal story. My daughter decided that she wanted to play softball in college. I think she was a junior in high school. And she decided she wanted to play softball in college. Now, she was a good high school catcher, and so I took her immediately to see my bass player, Thomas Southard, who has been instrumental in making quite a few softball standout college players. Well, we went to see Thomas, and I got out of the way and stood against the wall, and Thomas took over, and he began to put her through her paces. And he had her hitting and catching and running and just watching her, and he put her through her paces. And then Thomas set us down to talk, and he told her that she had strong potential, but if she wanted this was a whole different level. She was going to have to get very serious about it and work very hard for it. And I don't think I will ever forget what he said next. He said, I can teach you the next level skills you need, and I can get you into shape, but I can't give you the want to. I can improve your batting. I can even make you an even better catcher, but I can't want it for you. I was in awe. This guy was like a kung fu master. I was enthralled. I was inspired. I wanted to learn how to have that want to attitude that he was talking about. See, that was 100% attitude he was talking about. He wasn't talking about skill level. He was talking about attitude. Sure, it was going to take work and sacrifice and discipline, but without the right attitude, it was going to be a waste of time, and he knew it. And by the way, she did earn a scholarship and won a spot to play in Tennessee. I was told later that that kind of athletic ability is usually passed down from the father. I'm just saying. And so it goes far beyond sports. People who have no experience in a certain business sometimes get hired because the boss sees an attitude he wants in his employees, even if they don't know anything about the work. I've known a lot of very good singers and musicians in my life, but only a precious few ever make it to Motown or New York or Muscle Shoals or Nashville. It takes a special attitude. I've also known good preachers, dynamic speakers, guys who have everything going for them, but they didn't last in ministry because of their attitude. We frequently see marriages, careers, friendships, sports stars, celebrities, politicians, and entertainers go down in flames because of a crummy attitude. I've come to believe that the most effective disciples have cultivated the right attitude. And here in our straight to the point Gospel of Mark, Jesus talks about 4 attitudes often seen in people. You might see yourself in one or even several of these, but only the last one will put you on the list of great disciples for Jesus. So I'm hoping this is really, really practical for you. I'm hoping it's very practical. Now, number 1, we're going to talk about the pompous narcissist. Take a look at the 12th chapter of Mark, beginning in verse 38 in our straight-to-the-point gospel here. As he taught, Jesus said, watch out for the teachers of the law. They like to walk around in flowing robes and be greeted with respect in the marketplaces and have the most important seats in the synagogues and the places of honor at banquets. They devour widows' houses and for a show make lengthy prayers. These men will be punished most severely. The definition of a narcissist is someone who has a falsely inflated sense of their own importance. I need you to remember that. The definition of a narcissist, I start saying arsonist, the definition of a narcissist is somebody who has a falsely inflated sense of their own importance. And that's the perfect description of the pompous teachers Jesus describes. You're probably thinking of somebody right now. Oh, it's worse than I thought. And the rest of us are hoping you're not thinking of us. You might think of the Rolex-wearing evangelist in his private jet while shaming you into sending your money to his ministry. But it has nothing to do with wealth. It has to do with flaunting their position, impressing you with their wardrobe, and appearing to be well-known, admired, and respected. They want honor, but they don't want to earn it. It's almost like a kind of stolen valor. They take advantage of the weak and the defenseless, and they love to put on a show by praying greatly embellished prayers, accompanied by tears and embarrassingly wild gesticulations. They need you to look at them. Look at me. Look at me. This kind of disciple of Jesus might honestly think of himself as belonging to Jesus. But if they do, they believe they are Jesus' most prized possession. They have a pompous, self-important attitude. And that's just not going to work. It won't inspire the kind of caring service to others that Jesus requires. You know the guy, he sashays in, fashionably late to the high-profile event, hoping nobody missed his grand entrance. They exhibit false modesty when people of less station in life fawn all over them. They expect the best seats and great service, and if they don't get it, they make an excuse to leave early. They seize any opportunity to be the star of the show. They have to be the subject of everyone's adoration. And it is a difficult attitude to overcome. Most of us preachers have a little bit of a problem with this, not because we want to be narcissists, but because most of us are kind of, it's inborn in us that we want to please people. We want to see people happy. It's a difficult attitude to overcome because it requires no less than denial of self. You have to radically alter your self-perception and put others ahead of yourself. But let's not forget ourselves what we asked in the beginning of the message. What makes somebody a great disciple of Christ? The pompous narcissist is a disciple only of himself. That attitude will never allow you to submit yourself to someone else and seek to please one who towers over you in goodness and authority. To be a disciple requires submission to the one who called you. A pompous narcissist is going to have a terrible time with that. Now, he is not without hope. It'll take work, but if you pray the same prayer that John the Baptist prayed, which is this, he must become greater, I must become less. If you can work on that prayer and pray that prayer, then you have the beginnings of an attitude that will make you a great disciple of Christ. Let's look at a second attitude, the apathetic avoider. Jesus is teaching concerning how and when the end is coming, and that how to know when the end is near, the end of the earth, Revelation and all that. He's talking about the end of time, when he will return and the earth will pass away. And this is what he says in the 13th chapter. About that day or hour, no one knows, not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son, but only the Father. Be on guard, be alert. You do not know when that time will come. It's like a man going away. He leaves his house and puts his servants in charge, each with their assigned task, and tells the one at the door to keep watch. Therefore, keep watch, because you do not know when the owner of the house will come back, whether in the evening or at midnight or when the rooster crows or at dawn. If he comes suddenly, do not let him find you sleeping. What I say to you, I say to everyone, watch. Now, before we get into this second attitude, let's just say a word about end times, because a lot of you want me to preach about the end times. There are thousands, literally thousands of authors who've written thousands of books, and all of them claim to be correctly interpreting the signs of the coming of the ends of the age. And I don't know which one is right, if any of them are right. One of my Bible college professors was Dr. Lewis Foster. He was one of the greatest theologians and scholars of modern times. And I wish you could have met him. He was small-framed, bald, without his glasses. He was blind as a bat. And you'd never know it, but he held advanced degrees from both Harvard and Yale. He lived in a small, unassuming little house. And one evening, a door-to-door evangelist stopped at his home. And Dr. Foster, yesterday I was coming back from a wedding, and I stopped at Sheetz to get gas, and a young man, nice-looking guy, very friendly young man, he was a Mormon missionary. I was filling my tank up, and he walked up and he said, you want to go to church on Sunday? And I said, I don't have a choice. So this guy, that really did happen. And he kind of looked at me quizzically and then walked away. So he lived in this, Dr. Foster, the great theologian, lived in this little unassuming house. And one night an evangelist came to his door. And Dr. Foster opened the door, and the evangelist thrust his foot in the door so Dr. Foster couldn't get the door closed. He held up a big black Bible, and he said, what would you say if I could tell you the exact day Jesus is coming back? Dr. Foster grabbed his hand and yanked him into his house. He started pumping his hand, and he said, oh, I'm so glad you're here. I've been waiting forever for this moment. I'm so glad I could finally meet you. The guy pulls his hand away, and he kind of puts a little distance between him and Dr. Foster, and he says, do you know me? Dr. Foster said, yes, you're God the Father. Quite taken aback, the man said, no, I'm not. Lewis said, well, the Bible says about that day and hour no one knows, not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son, but only the Father. So you're God the Father. Sit down. We have so much to talk about. Poor man turned his back and walked out the door. I'm just telling you, if Dr. Foster wasn't sure, I know I'm not sure. I don't know a lot about this subject. I know Jesus is coming back. You know that? And I know I might still be alive. Do you know that? And I know I better be ready. Do you know that? But beyond that, I pretty much leave it up to the scholars to duke it out. In this story, Jesus he warns us about, though, an apathetic attitude. Jesus said that his second coming will be like this. He said it's like a man leaving for a while. So he's leaving for a little while, and he's left us in charge, and he's given us specific tasks to accomplish. And he says, don't let me catch you sleeping when I get back. A servant who was left with the responsibility of guarding the master's door, that's pretty important. He better be vigilant, because so much depends on him. That door is breached, everything is lost. Only an apathetic person avoiding his responsibility would fall asleep on duty. The application is so easy to see. Jesus has left each one of us with responsibilities. It's important for us to remain vigilant because so much is riding on our obedience. If we don't care very much or we avoid our duty and responsibility, Jesus might come back and catch us asleep. Here's the thing. I haven't met very many pompous narcissists. I've met a few, but very few. And I'm saying honestly, I don't know a single one among this crowd. Somebody who's taking advantage of their position, somebody who's trying just to impress people, somebody who wants to hog the best seat or parking place, somebody who places such a high value on their own importance that they're just annoying. I don't know anybody here who would pray long-winded prayers just so they can be in the spotlight. But I think I recognize some apathetic avoiders. Jesus has left us in positions of responsibility. He has work for us to do. But we avoid thinking about it. It's easy to busy ourselves with all the other things of life. And so we just avoid thinking about it. We either say, I'll try to influence that person next month or next year. Or we say, let somebody else do it. I know I could be of service to Jesus by joining the serving team or working with kids or helping at the next outreach event, but I just don't know enough, and I don't have the time really. Besides, our church has enough people already. Folks, we're falling asleep on the job. We're either avoiding our responsibilities or we just don't care. When Jesus used that phraseology, when he said, don't let me catch you sleeping when I come back, there was a sense of urgency in his time that doesn't exist for us today. Did you know that among Roman soldiers, and this is why it's so ludicrous when the early folks who said Jesus never rose from the grave, the disciples came and stole his body out of the tomb. That was so ridiculous because in the Roman army, the penalty for falling asleep on post was death. No questions asked, no trials, no hesitation. If they caught you sleeping on post, you were gone. Immediately executed, dead. So when Jesus says, don't let me catch you sleeping, it meant a lot more to them than it does to me. Folks, if we're falling asleep on the job, we're either avoiding our responsibilities or we just really don't care. Apathetic avoider. So what makes a disciple of Jesus? Well, it starts with our attitude. And it's not hard to see that if our attitude is that of the apathetic avoider, that's not going to inspire us to live a life of discipleship. There's a third attitude which is not going to lead us to being a real disciple, and that one is the arrogant armchair quarterback. We read about this guy in Mark 14:3-4. While he was in Bethany, reclining at the table in the home of Simon the leper, a woman came with an alabaster jar of very expensive perfume made of pure nard. She broke the jar and poured the perfume on his head. Some of those present were saying indignantly to one another, "Why this waste of perfume? It could have been sold for more than a year's wages and the money given to the poor." And they rebuked her harshly. Don't you just love an arrogant armchair quarterback? Not only are they not doing anything to help, but they see their job as observing those who are doing something and telling them how wrong they're doing it. They should have blitzed. He had his best receiver wide open in the end zone. They'd have won that game if they'd have kicked the field goal instead of that stupid attempt at a first down. All while sitting in his lazy boy in front of the television. It's not very often, but sometimes I'll hear somebody complaining about how one of you has done something. And it might have to do with small groups or worship band. Maybe it's something to do with kids or our facilities. And of course, the complainer could have done it way better. That's kind of arrogant. I mean, without even knowing the backstory, without knowing what went on behind the scenes, he could have knocked it out of the park. So first, that's just a bit egotistical and overconfident. But that's not the worst part. The worst part is the person who is finding fault with the linebacker never gets out of their armchair. Maybe we did blow it, but did you offer to help? Did you lift a finger? Or did you just take another sip of iced tea in your armchair? I heard a definition I love. I've never forgotten it. I heard this definition of football years ago that went like this. It said, football is an athletic contest where there are 22 people on the field who desperately need some rest and 70,000 people in the stands who desperately need some exercise. Remember the sermon, though. We're not slamming the armchair quarterbacks. We're asking, what makes a good disciple? And our answer has been, most of it is attitude. Now, if you're working at something, if you're serving at something, you're allowed to critique. If you're sitting around, nope, you're not allowed. So let's review. If you have the attitude of those pompous, narcissistic fat cats in chapter 12, if you think being a Christian is measured by how many people you know and how long and flowery your prayers are and the best seat and the best parking place and the Rolex on your wrist, that attitude is not going to inspire you to be like Jesus. If your attitude is that of the apathetic avoider in chapter 13, that's only going to inspire you to take a nap. And if your attitude is to criticize but never do anything, like the armchair quarterback in chapter 14, armchair quarterbacking is pretty much all you're ever going to do. It's true. Being a disciple of Jesus begins with your attitude. It really does. And so following 3 examples of a lousy attitude, Jesus provides the perfect attitude example to follow. You ready? It's the selfless servant. Let's pick up where we left off. Remember, Jesus was in Bethany. He's just relaxing with his friends. And in walks a woman who breaks a jar of expensive perfume and pours it on Jesus. Jesus didn't ask her to do that. She just did it. The living room quarterbacks had a lot to say about it, all of it negative. Now, here's what you need to know. Today, we might have, if we're fortunate and blessed, we might have a 401k or some family land or a nice nest egg to retire on. Back then, people very often kept their wealth in valuable commodities. Maybe it was precious metals or big silos full of non-perishable grain. But a common form of wealth was perfume and spices, because they weren't likely to go bad. They collected it, they saved it, and it could be sold easily to provide income if you needed quick money. Hers was worth a year's wages. That's a lot of money in any time. The median individual income, I checked, the median individual income in Warsaw has been the same for about 4 years. And it runs about $35,000. That's the median income in Warsaw. So if you're wondering why this woman was carrying around $35,000 worth of perfume, it was probably her life savings. It was probably her nest egg, something she'd been saving for a time when she was needing money. She blows the whole thing by pouring it on Jesus. And the armchair quarterbacks tear into her. Listen to Jesus' response. "Leave her alone," said Jesus. "Why are you bothering her? She's done a beautiful thing to me. The poor you'll always have with you, and you can help them anytime you want, but you will not always have me. She did what she could. She poured perfume on my body beforehand to prepare for my burial. Truly, I tell you, wherever the gospel is preached throughout the world, what she has done will also be told in memory of her." Now, I can understand, I really can. I can understand why the armchair quarterbacks criticized her. That was a whole lot of money. But this woman, otherwise unnamed in Scripture and unknown, did something beautiful because she had, and here's the point, it's what I've been trying to get to. She had the right attitude. We're not criticizing or even examining her actions. She had the right attitude. Jesus predicted that simple act would be told and retold in sermons around the world in memory of her. And here today it happened again. For 2,000 years, we've remembered and honored the woman who had the right attitude to be called a disciple of Christ. The attitude that she had, there are other things involved in being a disciple of Christ, but it starts with attitude. Can I quote Thomas Southern? "I can't want it for you. I can't want it for you." How did she behave like a real disciple? Well, number one, she really loved Jesus. Number two, she physically demonstrated how much she loved Jesus. Number three, she displayed a singularly unselfish attitude, giving an incredibly expensive gift to her Savior. Number four, she asked for nothing in return. Number five, unlike the pompous narcissist, she didn't demand the best seat because she was a heavy contributor. And number six, unlike the apathetic avoider, she seized the moment and she acted. And number seven, unlike the arrogant armchair quarterback, she didn't sit on her behind and criticize others. She acted. She acted. She got up and did something. In fact, her whole attitude can be expressed in just 5 words. Her whole attitude can be expressed in just 5 words. Now, you've been sitting here for a good half an hour, all for me to describe one attitude which will lead you to be a genuine disciple. You've been sitting here all this time for just 5 words. Somebody's saying, "Well, you should have told me the 5 words when I sat down. We could be gone by now." Jesus spoke the 5 words, so you know they're perfect. I'm just quoting him. What makes a good disciple of Jesus? What's the attitude for you to cultivate? Now, let's take our time here, because this is the whole crux of the matter. And we're getting pretty close to the end of our study of the book of Mark. What makes for a good disciple of Jesus? What's the attitude for you to cultivate that will make you a good disciple? Just think about that for a minute. You ready? 5 words directly from verse 8. She did what she could. That's the attitude that makes you a great disciple of Christ. That's what's taken us from one of the smallest congregations in the Northern Neck to a strong, loving church that's making a difference. And I don't think that's a narcissistic view. God has blessed us, and we testify to that. What makes you a great disciple of Jesus? Having this attitude, she did what she could. Make your attitude these 5 slightly different words. You ready? I'll do what I can. I'll do what I can. When you get up on Sunday morning and do all the hard work of rounding up your family for church, say to yourself, I'll do what I can. When God inspires you to serve or give or pray or testify or stack chairs or change a diaper, say to yourself, I'll do what I can. When you see somebody lonely or hurting, you'll say, I'll do what I can. When you need to stand up for truth, I'll do what I can. Let me hear you. When you need to defend the defenseless, I'll do what I can. When you're young and strong, I'll do what I can. When you're busy and rattled, I'll do what I can. When you're old and tired, I'll do what I can. Until he calls me home, I'll do what I can. That's the attitude that will make you a disciple of Christ. The kind of disciple that when you meet the one who wears the nail prints, he'll say, well done, good and faithful servant. He'll say that then. If you'll say now, I'll do what I can. Would you stand with me?